Welcome back to React Native Radio Podcast. Brought to you by a bunch of people avoiding their real jobs. Episode 211, Transitioning from Native to React Native at Coinbase.
So are you into cryptocurrency, Robin?
No, I can't say.
Not at all?
I do not own any cryptocurrency, no.
You don't own any? Okay.
No.
You're just staying above the
fray.
fray.
I have not joined in on this trend yet.
How about you, Mazen?
I do. I got in late, in quotes. I have some Ethereum and messed around with Sweatcoin for a little bit.
Wait, what did you say?
Sweatcoin?
Yeah. You would take your activity and convert it to cryptocurrency.
So you go for a run and you get crypto as a reward for your run? I don't know.
Really that's very interesting.
Is that still a thing?
I don't think so. No, they shut down.
So did you just lose all of the Sweatcoin that you had?
Yeah, it converted it to OMG coin. So
that sounds
another good choice.
Mm-hmm.
I love this. It's the best. There's so many different types. Of course, I actually bought my first Bitcoins in 2014. I needed to pay a contractor who was in Canada, and it was surprisingly difficult to pay people back then. So he just said, "Send me some Bitcoin." I'm like, "I've heard of it. How do I do that?" He said, "Go to Coinbase, Coinbase.com." First I'd ever heard of it. Signed up there, bought 4 Bitcoin for $2,500 and sent it to him. So $2,500 worth of work. I sent him 4 Bitcoin, which is now worth, a lot more.
I wonder if he sold it before it exploded. Probably.
I'm still connected with him on Twitter. I should ask him, see if he still has that. I did buy a few more for myself and hung on to them, but then it spiked to an incredible price of $1,500 each. So I couldn't pass that up and I sold most of it. So yeah,
the incredible price of $1,500 per Bitcoin.
Yeah. What's it now? 45,000.
Yeah, it's up there in the 40s.
It's, I don't know. I can say, I've been doing dollar cost averaging ever since then, just putting some in. Coinbase has this feature, which is really cool. Lets me just put a bit in every month. And I've just got the usual suspects, Ethereum, Bitcoin, Dogecoin, a little bit, Litecoin. But for the most part, I'm pretty basic, just buy some Bitcoin.
Blows my mind that Dogecoin is a thing. It's based off of the meme. The Doge meme.
From what I understand, the creator of Dogecoin is a little bit mind blown that it's a thing. Mm-hmm. But yeah, anyway, I'm not underwater, but that's, I guess, what everybody says when they get back from Vegas, that they broke even, I don't know. That's kind of how I look at it.
That's the goal.
However, we're not here to just talk about cryptocurrencies. I am joined today, as usual, by my resplendent co-host, Robin Hines, as well as our guest host, who may turn into a normal, regular host, Mazen Chami, and a couple of cryptocurrency guests who I will introduce shortly. Robin is a senior software engineer located in Portland, Oregon, works at Infinite Red, specializes in React Native. How you doing, Robin?
I'm good, although I feel like I need to go change to live up to the resplendent moniker that you just gave me. I'm not dressed the part.
Are you saying that's an aspirational title? It's not actually applicable right now. I mean, I
would
think
say it's
works.
aspirational, yes.
Mazen Chami, looking resplendent as always. He lives in Durham, North Carolina. He's a former pro soccer player and coach, and is a senior React Native engineer. Also works here at Infinite Red. How you doing, Mazen?
Doing well. Excited for this talk today.
Yeah, me too. All right, so let's talk to our guests instead of just ignoring them. I will say a big thanks to my friend Harry Tormey, who introduced me to Brent and Jacob and paved the way for this episode. Harry's been an Infinite Red friend for a long time, actually, since I think the first Chain React, he was a speaker there. Brent Walter is an engineering leader supporting the Client Foundations organization at Coinbase. The Client Foundations organization, say that 12 times fast, builds libraries and tools for all web and mobile app developers across Coinbase, and is responsible for the transition from native mobile apps to React Native apps. Did I do that right, Brent? Hopefully I hit that.
You nailed it. I should probably write it as a haiku next time.
that might be easier to read, yes. And then also we have Jacob Thornton. He is the technical lead for the Client Foundations organization, and he played a key role in transitioning both the mobile apps and mobile engineers from native to React Native. How's it going, Jacob?
Pretty good, man.
Awesome. Reminder, this episode is sponsored by Infinite Red, premier React Native design and development agency located fully remote in the US and Canada. We have years of React Native experience. Hit us up, hello@infinite.red for your next project. And don't forget to mention that you heard about us through the React Native Radio podcast.
We get very excited.
We do. Yes, we actually do. Like internal virtual high fives happen. All right, let's get into our topic for today. Transitioning from native to React Native at Coinbase, which is why we have Jacob and Brent here with us today. Just to start off, could you tell us a little bit about Coinbase for our listeners who, like me in 2014, may not know much about it?
Sure. So Coinbase is the leading crypto exchange in the world. And our mission is to bring economic freedom to all places with cryptocurrency as that vehicle. And so part of that mission is making our technology better and more accessible and more relevant. And React Native is part of that strategy for our company. And
crypto, of course, meaning Bitcoin, Ethereum. You have a whole bunch of different cryptos, right?
Yeah, I can't keep track of all the ones because we're adding new ones every day at this point.
The big question is, do you have Sweatcoin?
Mazen would like to know.
Yeah, I'm guessing if we ever did, it no longer exists based on the Mazen, sure.
I mean, I kind of like the idea behind it, but yeah. I did read that Coinbase is providing crypto financial services to 56 million users and generated 1.8 billion in revenue in the first quarter of this year, 2021 alone. That is insane. That is incredible.
Yeah, it's been a pretty wild ride, I would say. Like I've been at Coinbase for a little over 3.5 years, and it's gone so much further than kind of our even wildest expectations of where it would be. And still, even with all that, a lot of people are just like, this is the beginning, which is nuts. So
yeah, maybe we aren't late to the game, Mazen.
It's not too late.
Got in.
It's not too late.
And Robin still needs to buy her first.
In there? I gotta buy my first. Gotta be part of it.
Well, you know where to go.
I do.
So I guess the obvious question on everyone's mind is, at least our audience, why did Coinbase decide to transition your app from native to React Native? Tell us the story behind that, Brent.
Yeah, actually, I'll pass this over to Jacob because Jacob has more of a historian's perspective than I do leading up to early last year when I joined the team. So I'd love to hear Jacob's perspective on the history.
No, that's perfect.
And I can absolutely provide color around the strategy and execution.
Me on the spot. Yeah. Gosh, there's really so many different things that went into it. It's like one of those, like, the stars kind of aligning and coming together that just made it make a lot of sense. Hiring your friend Harry, like you said, it's a really big thing. We also had an engineer at the team, Nick Cherry, who independently wrote an entire kind of technical design doc on React Native and like how he thought that it was worth exploring or prototyping out based on his own experiences. Over time, this kind of evolved. We were just about to invest in, so at Coinbase, there's several different products that we invest in. So we have like institutional products, pro trading products, retail products. And our pro trading app was only a website at the time. And we had just started to invest in building an iOS product and an Android product, but we couldn't hire Android engineers. So Harry actually started to build the pro trading app in React Native, which quickly caught up to the iOS project and passed it basically to the point where they just shut down the pro iOS project. And so that was a really good first signal. A little bit after that, we took on a project that we call internally UMO. It's like our unified onboarding or unified mobile onboarding project. And our goal there was to kind of have this single onboarding experience. Our onboarding is really complex, actually, as you may be aware of. There's a lot of sort of things that we ask you for to prove that you are who you say you are when you're dealing with money and financial institutions and what have you. So shipping this kind of mobile onboarding experience to all of our products was something that was like really, really attractive to us. And we had now a React Native app for Pro. We had a native iOS app in Wallet, and we had a native iOS app and Android app for our retail customers. And so we kind of experimented with this like brownfield type implementation, as you may have been familiar with, which essentially had us building sort of this onboarding package that we distributed across the company. And in that, sort of a handful of us, maybe, I think there was just technically, I guess there was 5 of us that were learning React Native for the first time, building out this technologies. Like we had 2 native engineers and 3 like web experienced engineers that were just kind of diving into this onboarding project together. Shipped that, went really, really well, crushed a lot of our kind of expectations around just quality and just raw performance of the actual product. And then after that, we were like, okay, well, I think we should continue to invest in this, but let's start by building Android, which we had learned from doing Pro was actually historically the hardest thing. So with Pro early on, we struggled a lot with the ratings, with getting performance where it needed to be. And so we put together another sort of team of super talented folks. And we just kind of set off with the Android native engineers, both ramping them up on TypeScript and that whole world. We use TypeScript at Coinbase, by the way. And
yes.
Yeah. And so we like came up with a little curriculum to kind of teach people on the fundamentals of what we had learned so far from building the onboarding experience. And then kind of had them teach us a little bit more about Android native and what we could be doing to sort of make sure that we were getting the performance that we hoped. We instrumented a handful of kind of performance tooling and monitoring things. And then we got to work. And I think we were a couple of months early, and this is around the time Brent started to join. We were a couple of months actually ahead of schedule. Obviously, it's pretty hard to estimate, as y'all know, especially when you're like, how long will it take to write the app from scratch? Like, yeah, exactly.
I don't know.
Exactly. Yeah. Some engineers are like, oh yeah, this will be done in like 2 quarters. Some are like 2 months. Like it's kind of all over the place. But our team just really, really picked up a lot of momentum really, really quick. We invested in some really good infrastructure stuff, design system, a couple of other things like that, which paid a lot of dividends as we were onboarding native engineers in particular. And yeah, we got to a place where we were sending out internal builds, etc., and really excited with it. And then just kind of leadership made the call to also then build for iOS, which ended up not being a massive project, but was something that we hadn't like fully really tested. Some people were developing on it a little bit because the simulator is a little quicker and things like that, but not really going out of our way to like test, is that interaction like actually working on iOS and things of that nature. So, and then at that point, our iOS org was quite a bit larger than our Android org. And so then we kind of spun off and created this entire sort of plan for re-platforming essentially. I think it was like 30 plus engineers into React Native, which is complex in so many different ways, just logistically, emotionally. Like people love writing iOS code, they love Swift, people love writing Kotlin and Android, and I think like that's a really big piece of re-platforming. And yeah, so we undertook that for, I think that it in and of itself took a little over like a quarter of a year as we slowly ramped down development on iOS, and slowly we ramped up the iOS engineers through web first and then into React Native. And yeah, and then now here we are today with a massive React Native team. And, you know, we have our entire app has been React Native for a while now. And yeah, we're quite pleased with it. Excited about the next iteration of the app and like kind of growing it to do a lot more product surfaces and things like that at the company.
Awesome. That's a really great summary of the journey that you guys just went on.
Yeah. Sorry, a lot of words, a lot of steps there.
No.
I also like glazed over so much, obviously, but
I'm sure.
Yeah.
So for some context, Mazen and I are actually both on a client project right now, which is in the middle of a full app rewrite in React Native. So we're going to have lots of questions.
Nice. Well, I'll do my
to
best.
sort of take you more in depth into that whole process. I want to briefly go back to, you mentioned doing sort of a brownfield experiment before you went all in on an app rewrite. And most people in the React Native community are familiar with the infamous Airbnb exit, where they did brownfield and decided to drop React Native because of the experience doing brownfield. So I'm just curious what you all learned doing that brownfield experiment. What was it like? Did it go well?
Totally. Yeah. Maybe I'll handle this one too, Brent, because I led this project also. That it was called UMO. We were really lucky in that one of the engineering leads, director of retail engineering at Coinbase, this guy, Jesse Pollock, extreme champion of React Native and also just really great at reaching out to the community. So he connected us with Eli White from the React Native team pretty early on. And they actually came by our office, talked to us a bunch, showed us a lot of the stuff they were doing with Facebook Marketplace, and kind of talked us through sort of the things that they've seen work well, the things they've seen not work well. And I think then we talked to, honestly, a bunch of people from Airbnb and a bunch of other places. And what we found was that the integrations where you could have a pretty clear line in the sand were the ones that were most successful in a brownfield way. And onboarding was so separate, right? It's you click a button, here's an entire immersive experience, which takes you through an onboarding flow and then kind of spits you out at the end with a token and everything else that you need to actually use the application. And so it felt very ripe for it felt meaty enough that it's okay, we're going to have to learn React Native to build this thing. I don't know how many flows there are, but it's quite exhaustive in the Coinbase app. And I think also we just had a team of folks that were maybe overly confident in our skills. And we were just oh, this is going to be no problem. Obviously, React Native humbled us pretty quickly, but I mean,
it's almost not a brownfield app at that point.
Yeah,
when it's that isolated,
totally.
You're basically building
a
full-fledged React Native app, and just you happen to be sticking the bundle inside of existing iOS.
Exactly. And we also, we had Harry, who's written and talked about this stuff a lot, and was also able to, I feel we had a lot of community support before we even really dipped our toes into it, which is we're so spoiled in a lot of ways.
Yeah, that helps a lot, especially with a library like React Native that was probably still pretty beta at the time.
Totally.
It really helps to have people who are on the inside helping you out.
Definitely. Yeah. I think a lot of it also was talking to the Facebook people and them being open and kind of sharing, where are they going? How are they investing in it? Making us feel confident as a team that okay, we're trying to build this multi-billion-dollar company on top of this software. Is it going to be around by the time we launch this?
Yeah. Yeah. You'd want that reassurance for sure.
Definitely.
Well, I think as more companies like Coinbase and Microsoft and Shopify, as these companies that are well known and they're not going anywhere adopt React Native, then it just kind of shores up the whole ecosystem in a lot of ways. We have definitely, talk about staking a company on it. That's all we do as a consulting company is React Native. So we're happy to have you folks along.
It's sort of a chicken and egg thing. It feel like you have to get the big companies to invest in it so that it gains credibility, but it doesn't gain credibility until those big companies invest in it. So we're really happy to see a lot of really well-known players entering the React Native world.
As opposed to Flutter, which Google could kill tomorrow.
Hey, now.
I don't know if the editors will cut that one out.
I don't know if Todd will leave that one in.
We've already ticked off the Flutter community too much. Yeah, no, that's a fantastic kind of arc there. And I think the Airbnb side of it, we've talked to a few people. We've even had some people on the program, and a lot of it wasn't so much technical, and it was a lot more organizational. And so I'm really interested to hear more about it.
It was less about React Native itself and more that it didn't fit with what Airbnb was trying to do as a company.
Totally.
Yeah, and they didn't really have that support. You folks did a great job of kind of rallying support internally and externally, and having Facebook there. I mean that all makes sense to me.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so much of changing. So for context, I also worked at Twitter like way back in the day, and we had re-platformed everyone off of Ruby and onto Scala. And so I kind of had that firsthand view of how important cultural buy-in or like getting people excited about the technology versus just shoving it down their throats kind of.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it is honestly something that can be really easily overlooked, but I would say is by far the most important thing especially if you're replatforming a massive organization or business.
Definitely. So that kind of leads to my next question, which I think every company that does a React Native transition like probably faces, is that the process of getting developer buy-in and transitioning your developers. So I think you mentioned that you had both native and web developers moving to React Native.
We had a handful of we seeded the group originally with native and web developers. And so our thinking there was native engineers understand native platforms, period. Mm-hmm. And they're absolutely instrumental in making us kind of achieve the look and feel of a native app that we really wanted. The worst case scenario was that we build something that looks like a website or something like that and ship it to Android and iOS engineers and tank our NPS and everything else. And so that was really important. And I also think that was a lot of advice again we got from the community pretty early on, which is just when something goes wrong, you need to open up Android Studio, you need to open up just all these different tools. It's going to be helpful in profiling performance. It's going to be helpful in all these other ways. And coming from a web background, I was like, okay, I know a little bit of Swift and I can kind of get around there, but I'm going to be completely lost when Android's crashing and I'm not getting any logging in the console and all that kind of good stuff. So having native engineers happy and capable to dive into that stuff and help us work through a lot of these problems was just outrageously important.
I've always kind of felt and I came from originally a web background, but I did native iOS development. And I always felt like React Native has a surplus of web developers there. A lot of people coming from React.js, which is great. It's fantastic to have that community.
It's one of the selling points, right?
It is. It's like this natural onboarding. But we need more native developers to be doing React Native. And I think that's happening. We're seeing more native developers moving to React Native, but we need that perspective. And I think that collision of native and web developers allows for the best ideas to sort of pop to the top. And while still kind of having the standards that, native engineers would have for a mobile app. It's kind of the technology, because of the way it's constructed, has sort of forced these two groups together in a way that is sometimes uncomfortable, often uncomfortable.
Yeah,
but
there can be
much
clashes because there's sort of a different culture between them as in terms of rigor and what kinds of things are important. Pull requests get a little bit contentious sometimes.
They can, yeah.
Native engineers tend to care about different things, and web developers just want to ship it.
They've been bitten by different things, right?
Yeah, exactly. Just out of curiosity, what did the training process look like for both the web and the native engineers to get up to speed on React Native?
We did it in 3 phases, I would say. 3 phases, with the final phase also being kind of made up of 3 things. So bear with me. I'd say the first group was a small group of us, and I'd say we were just kind of told to figure it out. We were higher leveled engineers, so the expectation was they'll just figure it out and work with Harry. I paired a little bit with the pro team that had already been kind of doing some work there, and Harry had already kind of grown that team out. There's also a guy named Lucas who had some experience with React Native who was awesome. And so we were able to learn some basic stuff there and then just kind of feel it out for a little while, make a lot of mistakes and go back and delete them and slowly try to refactor them away. So I'd say that was the first sort of bit with the UMO project. And then when we actually started underway with the retail app and we brought in some Android native engineers, so Bruno and Diane, who were awesome. They were basically added to a team of 4 web engineers. And these 2 Android engineers, we essentially put them through a mini TypeScript class that lasted, Nick and I taught it over the period of maybe like 3 or 4 weeks, sort of, as they were half time still developing the Android app and half time listening to Nick and I try to explain React and like why TypeScript is not Kotlin and all kinds of goofy things. And I would say that was pretty fun, pretty loose though, because it's just 2 folks. And then after that, we kind of just got into the code. We did a ton of pairing. So we just would pair people together. And I think having working with Diane, for example, and having an Android engineer pairing taught us a ton about the ecosystem. And at the same time, we were able to say like, oh yeah, this is a hook. And like, this is why we're using the hook this way and not this way and everything else. So that went on for a while and was pretty good, but it's really hard to scale that type of learning and mentorship. So when you go from sort of like trying to add a group of, 2 to 5 native engineers versus 30 plus native engineers, you can no longer kind of just like goofily like pair through and like make jokes and figure it out as easily. And so that's when we kind of pulled back and created an entire sort of like a lot more thoughtful kind of way of getting people into React Native. And this was like largely the native and the remaining Android migration of native engineers. And so there were 3 different pieces of this big migration. So there was all led by a different person. So there was like a course thing that actually Harry did a lot of thinking there and like really drove forward. There was an entire mentorship tranche. So essentially if you imagine a timeline, first couple of weeks you would go through this course. I think it was like 2 to 3 weeks. And then you would be paired with a web expert, which we had way more web engineers than native engineers. So we were like, okay, we can pair and create like a TypeScript mentor relationship and embed them into a web project. Have them write code and like lead some web project for, I think they ended up doing this for a couple of weeks, like 4 to 6 weeks. Kind of get comfortable in the React ecosystem, get comfortable with hooks, get comfortable with TypeScript, and have a lot of resources that are already there with TypeScript. After that, we had contractors that we hired to be React Native mentors because we needed to we had like this small core that we considered React Native experts, but we couldn't just dump, all of our native engineers and be like, all right, good luck, experts, because we still had to write code and ship product and do everything as well. And we would have drowned it. and so, yeah, we hired a few folks to help supplement sort of mentorship of React Native. And then we kind of staggered people coming in to the actual mobile code base from native in 3 like groups. So we could kind of limit it to around like 8 to 10 people at a time so that we had enough one-to-one mentorship coverage for people that had React Native stuff, alongside of like Slack channels and office hours and lots of things of that nature. Also a lot of like long, hard conversations about just like culture and what we want and how we can keep it mobily and all that kind of good stuff. And yeah, I'm sure I'm probably missing something, but from a very high level, that's sort of how we went about it.
That's fantastic, Jacob. And I kind of want to piggyback on the culture, you alluded to the cultural kind of shift that had to happen there, and want to throw this over to Brent, because I know that you were a piece of this as well. Brent, what was your perspective on how you were able to sort of work on merging the web and mobile teams and make all of that work from a cultural standpoint?
Yeah, great question. And when you think about the stereotype, the trope of React Native is, oh, it's cheap and easy and fast. You hire some web developers and throw something out. And you think about the core of like the ethos of the Android and iOS ecosystem is we're native developers. We care about quality. Every pixel matters. We're curators of the user's experience in this ecosystem, and we care about everything that the user touches on their little device. And so a big part of making that transition work was not only saying we're making a business decision for React Native because it's part of our strategy and we think it can enhance collaboration, but also we can build a better product that is higher quality than what we're doing today. And so part of that was making sure we followed through on not only the messaging around that and being authentic, but putting boundaries around Net Promoter Score and ratings and performance and key business metrics, and showing that clearly that if this isn't successful, we're not going to ship it. So when we launched Android, it was very clear. We told the iOS engineers, if this isn't successful, it's a failure. There's no way we're going to replatform iOS. And only after it's successful, then we take that next step. And having that transparent communication and that trust and holding a very high level of quality means that the native engineers were willing to take that leap of faith when you also then give them that, fairly expansive education and replatforming support, saying your skills are valuable. We want to use your expertise and your platform knowledge and keep you at this company. And we want to build better applications. And we think this is better for Coinbase, but only if you come along with us. And sort of that framing is what makes that merger work, where you have React, which is a wonderful technology, a fantastic architecture, relatively unopinionated, combined with native expertise and platform APIs. You can create that much better of a product for your end users. And that's what we found through this journey, is that we can ship products faster, but also all of our business metrics and quality metrics also went up and to the right.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really smart way to approach it. Don't treat React Native as a cheap and easy tool. Like, treat React Native as a really powerful tool that can build amazing apps in conjunction with native knowledge and native tooling.
If you want to make a very performant Android or iOS app, you have to invest heavily in performance profiling and debugging and get deep into those systems. The same thing is with React Native. It's not a slow or fast technology. It's, are you spending the time and investing to make it a high performing application? And the answer is you can absolutely do that. You just need to spend the time and invest in it.
I think the sort of emotions and feelings matter around this too, because, someone coming in with a brand new technology, you've spent a lot of time refining, as an Android engineer, refining your knowledge and getting really good at a technology. And now they want to come in and for quote unquote business reasons, bring in another technology and that you're not very good at maybe yet. But reframing it and saying, hey, no, we need you
we
here.
We need you and your knowledge
with your specific skills.
To make this
incredibly important. Yeah. Because it's true. That's the thing. That's why it lands, is because it's true. It's totally true. Like if you, and we've been a part of this where we've rebuilt native apps where the native team has completely quit. They're just gone. They're like, well, you're moving to React Native. Okay, we're done. The way that it was handled was not great. So then they reach out to a consultancy and, of course we do our best, but it always kind of reveals that, like, hey, they kind of approach this the wrong way. So I really like what I'm hearing from you.
And kind of building on this, did you guys have any trouble recreating anything specific in React Native? Or did you have to keep anything native? Kind of going back to keeping both Android and iOS engineers involved in the process.
Yeah, that's a great question. Most of our app is TypeScript. I think we created a date, or I want to say maybe like some sort of date picker or calendar picker in UMO, and like that's really the only thing I can think of beyond, like, we have React Native Camera and other things like that, obviously, that are like native integrations. But that we actually wrote in-house, it's almost exclusively TypeScript. Now, were there things that were difficult to do? Yes, for sure. I think, as y'all are super aware, that a lot of interaction work is really, really challenging, right? I think anytime you're going over the bridge a ton during a sort of interaction, it's really hard to get right and feeling really, really good. We're not yet on Reanimated 2, so maybe that's like a spoiler for some folks, but which we could go into a whole probably a whole tangent on, but I'll try not to do that. I'll just say we aren't yet on Reanimated 2, and we aren't on Hermes either as a result also. And so being on Reanimated 1 and having this kind of bridge traffic to deal with, we're lucky in that a lot of our app doesn't rely on a ton of interactions, but there's a handful, like the one that's coming to mind that I spent a week of my time personally, like up every night trying to figure out, was our tab integration. I wrote a blog post on this actually.
Mm-hmm. I think it was in our newsletter.
Oh, okay, awesome.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I am just so extremely stubborn with things like that. And I know all my friends, I have a lot of UX friends, a lot of designer friends, and I know they just like roast me whenever the app has something like that doesn't look or feel right. And so I personally was like, no, I'm going to get this. And it was really, really, really tough to do right and get the performance there. But again, it just goes back to, I don't know, I feel like I was in web development from like so long where we were doing all this like absolutely bananas stuff to make these things that looked and feel really, really good. And then eventually web technology kind of caught up to the point where everything felt really easy. And in React Native, it kind of felt the same. It was like, okay, I can still get this to do what I want to do, but maybe in the special places where I want it to be a little more delightful, I kind of have to like roll up my sleeves a little bit and put in a little more time and work.
Going off of that, there was no platform divergence then. So you guys pretty much kept everything in TypeScript and didn't have to, create Android specific or iOS specific code.
Yep. Exactly.
Awesome.
Exactly.
Cool. When you were rewriting the app, did you guys aim for 100% duplication, or were you looking at adding in design changes along the way as you were working? What was your process kind of with that?
So we had one of the there's this guy named Etong who's a fantastic designer at Coinbase, and he joined the project as a PM and designer combo sort of. We were like real scrappy, and we sort of pretty early on. So from my history, I created this thing on Twitter called Bootstrap that's quite popular. So
wait, you
created
created
that?
Bootstrap?
yeah.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Well, I've used that a few times.
Is that like?
Yeah.
I feel like you should brag about that more because
That wasn't in your bio.
Yeah,
that's quite a claim to fame right there.
Yeah, it's a good one. Yeah. So anyways,
That's what I'm going to tell my friends later. It's like, oh yeah, I talked to the creator of Bootstrap today.
There you go. Yeah. So my friend Mark and I created Bootstrap a long time ago, and I've just thought about and been in the design system space for an epically long time. And one thing really powerful about design systems is they abstract away, especially in like the context of React Native, a lot of the sort of like layout, functional layout, display type things for you, right? And so as you're replatforming, a bunch of engineers from different like Swift engineers and Kotlin engineers coming from different backgrounds with different like ways of laying stuff out, it's much easier to kind of say like, okay, this is how we do it in this design system. And if you just want like a bunch of cells or whatever to lay whatever out, it's quite easy. And so we just leaned extremely hard into that. And I think we got a lot for free as a result.
Yeah, that's awesome. I have a bunch of questions that I want to ask you about Bootstrap now, but I'm not going to.
Sorry about that.
It's like, can we have you back on just to talk about that? No,
Yeah. So one thing with cryptocurrency is obviously security and privacy is a huge concern within just the entire space. Did you have any kind of concerns about security with React Native, or did you feel like the way that it approached, or I guess the affordances that it gives you were sufficient to hit your goals on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. We have a really, really amazing security team at Coinbase. Like, I can't say enough about them. I definitely feel like the most secure I've ever felt ever.
That's
and
awesome.
I think that there's like, the first month or so where you sort of fight it because you're like, oh my God, I have to like have all these different like key fobs and things to access anything, and all this different 2-factors and retina scans or whatever, and just banana stuff. And I think after a while you sort of are just like, okay, I get it, like we're dealing with money and they're taking this very, very seriously, and our security team is, like I said, it's like gangster. It's so good. And so as a result, everything we've done gets like, we get scanned, all the packages and stuff that we include go through an auditing process anytime we upgrade anything. All of our PRs, all of our technical design docs, all of this stuff goes through security reviews. So we're by the time everything gets vetted and signed off on and like gets the green light, we feel like pretty good that we're going to have a good time out there. That said, there's always unknown stuff. And I think that's, again, where the security team comes in. They are super responsive. We have dedicated security people per each like business unit, essentially, at Coinbase. And people, if there's a fire, they'll jump in and like, make sure we get out of it. So
You mentioned a couple libraries that you guys are using currently. Are there any other community libraries that you're using? And if so, what was the criteria in selecting them?
yeah, we're using a good amount of libraries, like React Navigation, for example, is a major one. We're using React Native Camera, like I said. Oh my gosh, putting me on the spot. I'm sure there's a ton.
I'm sure the list is long.
Yeah, let me just recite the package JSON from memory now.
Yeah, exactly.
Are you really a programmer?
Yeah,
if you can't?
just busted. But
What about state management? What do you use for state management?
so we actually have like 2 teams now that we have created that are in the Client Foundations team, which is like our client infrastructure team. And one of them is our data layer team. And so they're in the process of like moving us to GraphQL. And we also have this thing called instant hooks, which is like an entire like hook based data delivery system for like real-time updates for like our candlesticks and order books and things. So it's a whole massive thing. Again, if you want another guest, I can introduce you to a guy will blow your mind with
I'd love that.
with thinking around data stuff and state.
Well, we still have to do state management part 2.
Yeah, we still have to do
Yeah,
that.
so that could be fun.
Yeah.
I mean, I can talk about state management all day long. I'm the primary maintainer of MobX State Tree, so it's something I really enjoy.
Oh, nice. Awesome. Very cool. We used MobX on web for a long time. I like MobX.
Yeah, it's cool. It's well, yeah. I'm not going to get on.
You're like,
tangent
it's so
'cause
cool.
we'll be-
Let me tell you
Stop.
about how cool it is.
yeah, let's keep going. Yeah, no.
Cut you off.
Oh, one thing actually, just really quick, I do not want to miss the second part of your question, which was how did we select the packages that we do select? So there was a lot of criteria here. I think in general, we actually opted to, when reasonable, rewrite a lot of things versus use external third-party stuff. Partially for security concerns, partially because, especially when we started this project, like React Native still felt pretty early on. And so the like quality of a lot of the projects that or packages that were out there and the ownership maintenance thing coming from an open source background with Bootstrap and a handful of other open source things, like I totally get it. It's a massive, and I'm sure you do as maintaining the MobX. And I know that I'm sure y'all have like worked with this. It's maintaining open source is a ton of work and it's really scary to rely on some of these packages. In general, I'd say we went for like less is more kind of strategy. There is the like React Native kind of like blessed repo that has like a bunch of packages. I can't think of what it's community repo off the top of my head, but most of the packages we rely on are hosted from there, except for maybe like a handful.
Yeah, I was part of that. I was part of that process of extracting a lot of modules from React Native and into the React Native community repo. I extracted, for example, React Native WebView out of there and have been involved in maintaining it since. Normally for projects and apps, I would be like, use third-party modules. Like it's just going to make your life easier in so many ways. For something like Coinbase, it actually makes you feel better that you're taking a more
literally
hands-on approach.
own your dependencies.
Roll
your own
dependencies.
Even if it means like taking some code and like looking at like, okay, I like how this works. Copy, paste. like
drop it in.
Exactly. We are definitely in a unique place here dealing with people's financial stuff. So
you don't want to just have like a bot like auto updating everything and releasing.
Deeply no.
So in my past, I've had to do a lot of work with charts, and I really like your charts in the app. If you don't mind me asking, is it custom built, or did you guys use a library that's out there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I believe we're using D3 right now, actually, or like some pieces of it. I know that we went back and forth on this a number of times. We have some like internal home baked one. I know we were using on web for a while. We had our own charting layout thing. And I think that Kat, who's leading our design system stuff, shout out Kat, she took on charts basically completely on her own for a good amount of time to get them, again, performant. It was really hard. I know she spent a bunch of time on getting like gestures and like scrolling back and forth on them, all that sort of stuff, updating. She did so much work around trying to we actually, when you like scrub over a chart, we update some of the like text things in the UI. And I remember she was using like inputs at one point and like updating the input values and things like that, just like little hacks to try to like prevent the app from re-rendering or redrawing things out. But I believe with the actual lines of the chart, she was using something like D3 or something. I can't remember exactly.
Yeah, they really are beautiful. Although today the data that is being displayed isn't so beautiful,
Yeah.
as we see a big drop.
Right, classic.
And yeah. One last question for Brent. When you were doing this kind of integration of the teams, what would you say were kind of, I guess, the biggest challenges in doing that? And then also kind of what were the biggest successes that you saw come out of that you're kind of most proud of?
I'd say that the biggest success is that we now within our retail organization, we have a product excellence group, and it's made up of former native engineers who are now taking over the mantle of React Native development for their teams and are the drivers of quality and performance and JavaScript standards and patterns for that code base. And just seeing and the lead of that was a former iOS engineer, and just seeing that transformation from, fearful and reluctant and hesitant to like excited and passionate and leading, to me is the biggest success of watching that transformation.
That's fantastic. Yeah. And what would you say were the biggest kind of challenges? I mean, you've talked about some of them so far, but like just to kind of put a pin in it.
The biggest challenge is getting buy-in and retaining trust. You can make a decision and it can be for the right reasons, but if you aren't honest and transparent, and you don't share that in a vulnerable way with folks, they don't want to come along for that ride because they don't trust you and they feel like you're forcing them to change careers, because going from iOS or Android development to React Native is a change in career. And I think the leadership team at Coinbase did a phenomenal job with empathy and honesty and transparency. And also Coinbase as a company, the vision and the mission and the ethos and the way the company operates was enough of an incentive with the time and place so people would take that leap of faith. Because you can imagine if you had a company that people are already unhappy about, that they already feel isn't going to be successful and isn't going to treat them well, they're not going to bet their careers on this transition.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I guess what I'm hearing from you and what I really love is if other companies are considering making this transition, I'm sure that they're going to be listening to this podcast. It's that we get feedback all the time. Like, oh, I use this podcast as sort of part of my research for this transition. What I'm hearing is that you do really need to get those parts right. You really need to get the trust right. You need to really listen to people. You need to understand what they're concerned about and have them understand what they're bringing to the table in terms of their knowledge set and their value. And like you said, like turning them from sort of being unwilling, which is a natural thing. Like, don't like get mad at them for that. That's a natural human thing to be reluctant about this stuff, to then becoming advocates and becoming excited about the new direction, but also doing it in a way, like you said, like it was totally a possibility that you would have said this didn't work. Like that was on the table as being an outcome. It wasn't a predetermined outcome. And so it was like, if we're going to use this, it's because we like it, not because we just made an organizational decision and we have to go with it.
Yep, absolutely. It's getting alignment on how you're going to make the decision and why you're making this bet in this test, and then clearly communicating that information every step of the way, saying, this is what we think is best for the company. This is what we're going to try to do about it. Here's our next milestone, and here's how we're going to make a decision at that next milestone. And then, just being very honest about that transition and then helping people go along with you on that journey. And if they believe just as you do as a leader, this is the best decision technologically for the company and for the product, and you're making the decision for the right reasons, then they're in a position where they can either decide that staying with the company and growing and learning this new technology is in my benefit, or they can make the decision going, my career is actually sticking with iOS or Android, and this is something I would rather do despite everything that's around me. And that's okay too. Because if you ask me if I had to go learn Scala tomorrow, I'd be like, no, thank you.
Yeah, as an old Ruby dev myself, I think moving to Scala would have been an interesting thing back in the day. I really loved Ruby, and I kind of went away from it kicking and screaming. But yeah, I mean, you move along with your career, and I was really, really interested in mobile. And while there were some options to do Ruby on mobile, they weren't long lasting, and they didn't stick around. So if I wanted to be in that platform, I had to grow.
Definitely.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Brent and Jacob, for being on the show today. It is fantastic hearing from you and hearing about your journey with Coinbase. Very, very much appreciate it. Where can people find you online if they want to follow you and kind of see more content?
Good question. So I have a super inactive Twitter account, twitter.com/fat, F-A-T.
F-A-T?
F-A-T.
Okay.
GitHub, F-A-T also. Medium, F-A-T also. And that's where I am mostly online, although I'm like pretty hard to find podcasts here and there.
What's the story between F-A-T?
F-A-T. Oh my God. That's for another podcast. Long story.
And Brent, where can we find you?
Yeah, online I'm a ghost. So the best place to get anything from me is the stalking on LinkedIn, probably. And then look for more blog posts coming out from the React Native engineers at Coinbase, because we have a giant series of technical deep dives in a lot of the parts and pieces that Jacob talked about today over the next handful of months and quarters.
Perfect. Yeah, definitely we'll be tuning into that. People can also check those out. We'll most likely be putting them into our newsletter, reactnativenewsletter.com. Robin, you can find her at Robin Hines with an E. Mazen, you can find him at Mazen Chami. And you can find me at Jamin Holmgren. React Native Radio is at React Native RDIO on Twitter, because Jacob didn't give us enough letters when he worked at Twitter. He figured 3 was enough for anybody. So, as always, thanks to our producer and editor, Todd Worth, our transcript and release coordinator, Jed Bartowski, our social media coordinator, Missy Warren, and our designer, Justin Husky. Thanks to our sponsor, Infinite Red. Check us out, infinite.red/React Native. Thanks to all of you listening today. And again, thank you to Jacob and Brent for joining us today. We will see you all next time.
Bye.